Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're going to be diving into something really cool today.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah,
What is it?
the GPT-4 Technical Report.
Nice.
So this is all about a new program from OpenAI,
Okay.
and
I
it's like
some buzz about this one.
super smart computer program.
Yeah.
And we're going to break it down so that anyone can understand it,
Really?
even if you're 12 years old.
Wow.
But we're also going to get into some of the technical details for all you techies out there.
Awesome.
So we'll be looking at how these GPT-4 concepts can be used in building some really cool AI products.
Sounds fun. Let's start with the basics.
Okay.
What is GPT-4?
Yeah, what is this thing?
You can think of it like a really advanced chatbot,
Okay.
but unlike
Anybody-
the chatbots you might have seen before,
Yeah.
GPT-4 can understand
But-
both text,
Okay.
like words and sentences,
Mm-hmm.
and images.
Ooh, so it can like read a book and look at a picture at the same time?
Exactly. It's called a multimodal model
Multimodal.
because it can handle multiple types of information,
Gotcha.
like text and images.
Okay.
And under the hood,
Mm.
it's built using something called a transformer architecture.
What is that?
Well, you can imagine it like a super efficient filing system
Okay.
that helps GPT-4 make sense of all the information it's given.
So it's like a filing system for the brain.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So how does GPT-4 actually learn? Does someone have to sit there and teach it everything like a teacher?
Not exactly.
Right.
It learns by itself
Oh,
through a process called training.
what's that?
Imagine you gave GPT-4 a giant book to read
Okay, I'm imagining it.
and asked it to guess what the next word on each page would be.
Oh, so it's kind of like a super-powered autocomplete?
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And by doing this over and over again,
Oh, they-
tons and tons of text and images,
Wow.
GPT-4 starts to learn patterns and relationships in the data.
So the more it practices, the smarter it gets, just like us humans.
Exactly.
Cool. Good. How smart is this GPT-4 really? I mean, can it do my homework?
Well, maybe not your homework specifically,
Okay.
but it did pass some incredibly difficult tests.
Like what?
For example, it took a simulated version of the bar exam,
The bar exam.
the one lawyers have to pass,
Oh, wow.
and it scored in the top 10%.
Top 10%. That means it did better than most humans who take that test.
That's right.
Wow, that's crazy.
It's a big deal.
And wait, didn't they try this with an older version of GPT? GPT 3.5?
Good memory.
How did that one do?
GPT 3.5 was also tested on the bar exam,
Okay.
but scored in the bottom 10%.
Oh, so GPT-4 is way smarter.
You can see the huge leap in ability from GPT 3.5 to GPT-4.
Yeah. So that's like going from failing a test to getting an A+.
It is. It's huge.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But how did they even know that GPT-4 would be this smart? Did they just like cross their fingers and hope for the best?
Not at all.
Okay.
They use a really cool method called predictive scaling. They noticed that when they trained smaller models with increasing amounts of computing power, their performance got better in a predictable way.
Gotcha.
It's like a power law relationship,
Power law.
where a small increase in power leads to a big jump in performance.
Okay, so the more power you give it, the smarter it gets.
You got it.
Okay, cool. But can you give me an example
Yeah.
of how this prediction thing works?
Sure. Imagine you're baking cookies.
Okay, I like cookies.
If you double the size of your cookie batch,
Mm.
it'll take longer to bake, right?
Yeah.
But you can use a simple formula
Okay.
to figure out how much longer.
Based on how much bigger the batch is?
Exactly. OpenAI did something similar with GPT-4.
Okay.
They used a formula
Okay.
based on the relationship between computing power and performance
Mm-hmm.
to predict how well the bigger model would perform.
Okay, I'm starting to get it.
Yeah.
So more power, more smarts, and they can even predict how much smarter it'll get. That's incredible. But enough about predictions. I want to see what this GPT-4 can actually do with all this power.
Okay, sure.
Can you show me some examples?
Absolutely. Let's start with something fun.
Okay, I like fun.
One example in the report shows GPT-4 being given a picture of a smartphone
Okay.
with a really old big connector plugged into its charging port.
What do you mean?
It's the kind of connector you used to see on old computer monitors.
Okay.
Definitely not something you'd plug into a phone.
So they plugged a giant connector into a tiny phone port. That sounds ridiculous. Could GPT-4 understand why that was funny?
Yes. GPT-4 got the joke.
Really?
It understood that the humor came from trying to plug something so old and big
Right.
into a modern smartphone.
Right.
It's like trying to fit a square block into a round hole.
Which is pretty impossible and fun.
Exactly.
That's amazing. It's like GPT-4 has a sense of humor, What other cool stuff can it do with pictures?
Well, it can also understand charts and graphs. They showed GPT-4 a chart about how much meat people eat in different parts of the world
Okay.
and asked it to do some calculations based on the data.
So it had to read the chart, find the right numbers, and then do some math.
Exactly. And it did it perfectly.
Wow.
It showed that GPT-4 can not only see pictures,
Huh.
but also understand the information they contain just like a human can.
Wow, that's impressive. I'm starting to think this GPT-4 could be a really helpful research assistant.
It definitely could.
Yeah.
And in another example, they showed GPT-4 a picture of something pretty strange. A man ironing clothes on top of a moving taxi.
Wait, what? Ironing on a taxi? That's crazy. Could GPT-4 tell what was so weird about the picture?
It totally could.
Really?
GPT-4 immediately pointed out that it was unusual to see someone ironing clothes on top of a taxi.
Right.
It understood that this activity was out of place and didn't make sense in that context.
Okay, I'm officially impressed.
Yeah.
GPT-4 can understand charts. It can spot weird stuff in pictures. Can it understand memes, too?
You bet. They tested it with a funny meme that showed chicken nuggets arranged to look like a world map.
I love those.
The joke was that it was pretending to be an actual satellite image of Earth.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
So could GPT-4 figure out why it was funny?
It sure did.
Really?
GPT-4 explained that the humor came from the fact that they were using a silly picture of chicken nuggets to represent something serious, like a satellite image.
It's like those two things don't go together.
Exactly.
This is incredible. It's like GPT-4 understands humor on a whole other level.
Right.
But I have to ask, is GPT-4 perfect, or does it have any limitations?
While incredibly impressive,
Okay.
GPT-4 does have limitations.
Like what?
It's important to remember that it's still under development and learning. One limitation is something called hallucinations.
Hallucinations, like seeing things that aren't there.
Kind of. In the AI world,
Okay.
hallucinations mean that GPT-4 can sometimes make things up.
What?
It might give you information that sounds very convincing, but is actually incorrect or nonsensical.
Oh, so it's like a storyteller who gets a little carried away sometimes.
Exactly. So while GPT-4 is incredibly smart,
Yeah.
it's important to remember that it can sometimes make mistakes.
Good to know. It's always a good idea to double-check things, especially when it comes to important information. Are there any other limitations we should be aware of?
Another one is its limited context window.
Context window. What's that?
Think of it like your short-term memory.
Okay.
You can only hold so much information in your head at once, right?
Totally. Trying to remember a whole textbook would make my brain explode.
Well, GPT-4 has a similar limitation.
Okay.
It can only remember a certain amount of information at a time.
Okay.
This means that if you give it a really long text or a lot of instructions, it might forget the earlier parts.
Oh, so it's like giving it a really long recipe with tons of steps.
Yeah.
It might get lost along the way.
Exactly. This limited context window is something that AI researchers are working on improving. But for now, it's important to break down complex tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks when working with GPT-4.
Gotcha. So besides hallucinations and the limited context window, are there any other limitations we should be aware of?
Yes, one more that's really important for people working with AI products is the issue of bias.
Bias. You mean like showing favoritism towards certain things?
Sort of.
Okay.
Remember how I mentioned that GPT-4 is trained on massive amounts of data created by humans?
Yeah, like all those books and websites and stuff.
Right. Well, sometimes that data can contain biases or prejudices that exist in the real world.
Oh, like if you only read books from one country, you might develop a biased view of the world.
That's a great example. So because GPT-4 learns from human data, it can sometimes pick up on those biases.
Oh, I see.
And this is why it's so important for AI developers to be really careful about the data they use to train these models.
Yeah.
We don't want to create AI that perpetuates harmful stereotypes or discriminates against certain groups of people.
That's a really important point. It's a good reminder that AI is a reflection of us, and we need to be mindful of the values we're instilling in these systems. So far, this has been a super interesting deep dive. We've talked about GPT-4's incredible abilities to understand images and text how it learns, and some of its limitations like hallucinations, the limited context window, and bias. But what does all of this mean for someone who actually builds AI products? How can they use this information in their work?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Let's shift gears a bit and think about it from an AI product manager's perspective.
Okay, let's do it. I'm curious to see how all of this technical stuff translates into real-world applications.
Well, first and foremost, understanding how computing power affects performance is crucial.
Right.
Just like you wouldn't use a giant oven to bake a single cookie.
Right.
You wouldn't want to waste resources on a supercomputer if a smaller setup could handle the job just as well.
All right, that makes sense. Using the right tool for the job is always important, especially when we're talking about powerful technology like AI. What else should AI product managers keep in mind?
Another key takeaway is the importance of context. Because GPT-4 has that limited context window.
Right.
We need to make sure we're giving it enough information to work with.
Yeah.
It's like giving someone a recipe, but forgetting to tell them what ingredients to use.
Yeah, that wouldn't end well. Context is key, whether you're baking a cake or building an AI product.
Absolutely. And lastly, AI product managers need to be hyper aware of potential bias in these models.
Yeah.
They need to make fairness and inclusivity top priorities when developing their products.
Right.
To make sure they're building AI that benefits everyone, not just a select few.
That's a great point. We need to make sure that the AI we create is fair and equitable for everyone. This has been such an insightful conversation so far. I'm learning so much about GPT-4 and its potential, but I'm also starting to see the bigger picture of how we need to approach AI development responsibly.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
It's all about finding that balance between pushing the boundaries of what's possible with AI,
Right.
while also ensuring that we're using this technology ethically and for the benefit of all humankind.
Well said. I'm excited to hear more about the ethical considerations and the future of AI.
Me too.
But for now, I think we've covered a lot of ground.
I agree. We've gone from the basics of GPT-4 all the way to its potential impact on the future of tech. And we've done it in a way that even a 12-year-old could understand.
That's the magic of the deep dive. We break down complex topics and make them accessible to everyone.
It's been quite a journey so far, hasn't it?
It really has.
We've seen GPT-4 ace exams, decipher humor, and even analyze charts.
It's amazing.
It really does feel like we're on the cusp of a new era in technology.
It's mind-blowing to think that we're creating machines that can understand and interact with the world
Right.
in ways that were once considered science fiction.
Yeah. But with all this power comes a lot of responsibility, right?
We need to make sure we're building AI that's safe and aligned with our values.
And that's something that OpenAI takes very seriously.
Okay, good.
In fact, the report spends a good amount of time talking about the work they're doing
Okay.
to make GPT-4 safer and more reliable.
How do they do that?
One of their main strategies
Okay.
is something called
What is it?
reinforcement, learning from human feedback, or RLHF for short.
OLHF.
It's a pretty fancy name,
It is.
but the concept is actually quite simple.
Okay, I'm all ears. Break it down for me like I'm 12.
Imagine you're teaching a dog a new trick.
Okay.
You give the dog a command, and then give it a treat when it does the trick correctly.
Right.
Over time, with enough treats and encouragement,
Yeah.
the dog learns to associate the command with the desired behavior.
So it's like positive reinforcement for AI.
Exactly.
Give it a virtual pat on the head when it does something good.
That's essentially what RLHF is all about.
Okay.
They give GPT-4 a task
Uh-huh.
and then provide feedback on how well it did. Okay.
Rewarding good behavior and discouraging bad behavior.
Gotcha.
And over time,
Yeah.
GPT-4 learns to behave in a way that aligns with what humans want.
That's pretty cool. So who's giving GPT-4 all this feedback? Do they have like a team of AI trainers who sit there all day giving it thumbs up or thumbs down?
You could think of it that way.
Okay.
They actually work with human experts
Okay.
who provide feedback and guidance during the training process.
Oh, wow.
These experts help to identify and correct potentially harmful or biased outputs, ensuring that GPT-4 stays on the right track and doesn't learn any bad habits.
So it's like having a quality control team for AI,
That's a great way to put it.
making sure it meets human standards of behavior.
Exactly.
Okay. But even with all this training, can't things still go wrong? What if someone tries to trick GPT-4 into doing something bad?
That's a great question. It's something that researchers are very mindful of,
Okay.
and it's why they go to great lengths to test the model's robustness.
Robustness.
It means how strong and reliable it is.
Okay. One way they do this is through something called red teaming.
Red teaming. Sounds intense. Is this where they pit GPT-4 against another AI and let them battle it out?
Not quite a battle,
Okay.
but it does involve a bit of a challenge.
Okay, what is it?
Red teaming is where security experts try to find ways to break GPT-4
Oh.
to exploit its weaknesses or trick it into doing something it shouldn't.
So it's like they're trying to find any cracks in GPT-4's armor.
Exactly. They're essentially playing the role of the bad guys.
Oh, wow.
trying to outsmart the AI.
Okay.
And by doing this, they can identify potential vulnerabilities and make the model even more secure.
Wow, that's fascinating. It's like a constant game of cat and mouse
Yeah.
between the AI developers and the security experts, each trying to outdo the other.
That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
And this back and forth is crucial because it helps to ensure that AI is developed responsibly.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just about making AI smart. It's also about making it safe, ethical, and beneficial to humanity.
So it's like teaching our AI creation to be a good citizen of the world.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
We want to instill in our AI creations a sense of responsibility and a commitment to using their abilities for good.
That makes sense. I think that's a great place to wrap up part 2 of our deep dive into the GPT-4 Technical Report.
I agree.
We've learned so much about how this amazing AI model works, how it learns, and the steps being taken to make it safe and reliable.
It's been quite a journey so far, hasn't it? But we're not done yet.
Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll explore some even deeper concepts and discuss what the future holds for GPT-4 and the world of AI. Welcome back to our deep dive into GPT-4.
It's great to be back.
I'm still reeling from all the amazing things this AI can do.
It is pretty impressive, isn't it?
It really is. But before we wrap up, there's one more concept I want to unpack.
Okay, what's that?
This idea that OpenAI used smaller models to predict how good GPT-4 would be.
Yeah, predictive scaling.
It sounds kind of like AI Inception.
It is a fascinating concept.
It is. So can you explain it a little more?
Sure. It's based on the idea that there's often a link between how much computing power you use to train an AI and how well it performs.
So more power equals more brain power.
You could put it that way.
Okay.
It's not always a perfect one-to-one relationship.
Gotcha.
But generally, more computing power often leads to better performance.
That makes sense. But how did they use this to predict GPT-4's smarts? Did they have some kind of magic formula?
It wasn't magic, but it was clever. They trained a bunch of smaller models, each with different amounts of computing power, and then looked at how well they did on a specific task. What they found was that performance improved in a predictable way as they increased the computing power.
So it's like if you train harder, you get better results, and they figured out a way to measure that.
Exactly. And once they had this pattern, this relationship between computing power and performance, they could use it to predict how well a much larger model like GPT-4 would do with even more power.
So they basically used the little guys to predict the big guys' potential. Pretty cool.
Very cool. And the amazing thing is that their predictions were pretty spot on.
Yeah.
GPT-4's performance on various tasks matched up closely with what they had predicted based on the smaller models.
That's incredible. But why is this predictive scaling such a big deal?
Well, besides being a cool trick,
Okay.
predictive scaling has some important real-world uses,
Like what?
especially when it comes to safety and using resources wisely.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How does knowing how well an AI will perform help with those things?
On the safety side,
Okay.
being able to predict how AI models will behave as they get more powerful helps researchers figure out potential risks and develop safeguards.
Okay.
It's like knowing how much weight a bridge can hold before it collapses.
Makes sense. You always want to plan for the worst case scenario, especially with something as powerful as AI.
Absolutely. And in terms of resources, predictive scaling can help companies decide how much computing power to invest in training their AI model.
Gotcha.
It's all about finding the right balance between performance and efficiency.
Right. You wouldn't want to use a giant rocket to launch a tiny satellite.
Exactly. Predictive scaling allows companies to be smarter about how they use their resources, making sure they're getting the most out of their AI development.
This whole concept of predictive scaling is really blowing my mind. It's like we're not just building a rocket, but we're also figuring out how to steer it and make sure it reaches its destination safely.
That's a great way to put it. It's all about responsible innovation, pushing the limits of what's possible with AI while also considering the potential risks and consequences.
It's a delicate balance, but super important if we want AI to be a force for good in the world. Speaking of the future, it's hard not to wonder, if GPT-4 can already do all these amazing things, what will future AI models be capable of? It's both exciting and a little bit scary to think about.
It is a question that sparks a lot of imagination. What we know for sure is that AI is evolving at an incredible pace,
Yeah.
and we can expect even more groundbreaking advancements in the years to come.
It's like watching a science fiction movie come to life right before our eyes.
I know it's mind-boggling. So how do we prepare for this future? I think it starts with staying curious and informed.
Okay.
We need to keep learning about AI, talking about its potential benefits and risks, and shaping its development in a way that aligns with our values.
It's like we're all on this grand adventure together exploring the uncharted territory of artificial intelligence.
I like that.
And we need to work together to make sure it's a journey that benefits all of humanity.
Well said. It's a collective effort,
Yeah.
one that requires collaboration, open-mindedness, and a shared commitment to building a future where AI empowers us to reach new heights.
I love that. It's not just about the technology itself. It's about how we choose to use it and the kind of future we want to create.
Exactly. And with that thought, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the GPT-4 Technical Report.
What an amazing journey it's been. We've learned so much about GPT-4's incredible capabilities, its potential impact on society, and the importance of developing AI responsibly. It's a lot to process, but I feel inspired and hopeful about the future of AI.
I feel the same way, and I hope our listeners do too. It's been a pleasure exploring these fascinating ideas with you all.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back soon with more explorations of cutting-edge research and the big questions that shape our world. Until then, stay curious and keep learning.